Hi everybody, it's Catrin from KISS, Keto It's Simple for Success, coming to you live in the KISS public group to have a chat about some common obstacles and give you some practical ideas to actually solve those issues. Today is the Saturday before Easter, and I know that hopefully some people will be joining us. If you're watching on YouTube on the replay, welcome. Please do hit the subscribe button and give it a thumbs up if you enjoy the content. And all the information about joining our community and how you can get more information about us is in the description of the video. Okay, moving along very swiftly. Hopefully we'll have lots of people joining with their questions. However, I have written a little bit of content and some common frequently asked questions that come up in the group, and hopefully I'll be able to give some practical solutions for those. Okay, so I'm just going to crack on this evening because it is the weekend and I believe that everyone's time is precious. So the first thing that I hear a lot of people ask, or some of the issues they have with actually starting, is knowing where to start. How do you actually get going on this ketogenic lifestyle? Well, firstly, I think it's really easy to feel overwhelmed with the amount of information there is available to people about the ketogenic lifestyle. And I think for me, it's quite easy to allow some of that overwhelm to actually become excuses as to why not to start. So the first thing I would say is the first thing we need to do is to understand that a ketogenic lifestyle is not as difficult maybe as we make it out to be. So my top tips for knowing where to start then, the first one would be actually just remove sugar from your diet. That would be the first step. And that means from everything. So all your cooking sauces, your ketchups, your dressings, all those things when you look in your cupboard will have sugar in, and they all need to go. So that's a good first step. Going through all the food that you have at the moment, and if one of the ingredients is sugar, has to go. Okay, the only thing that you will see that has natural sugar in, which we still eat, is dairy products. So so cheese will still have tiny amounts of sugar, and so will things like cream. But everything else, all that processed food, everything in the cupboard that has sugar in it needs to go. And that's the first thing to do if you're wondering where to start with a ketogenic lifestyle. Once you've got rid of the sugar, you're going to need to remove all the foods from your diet that contain grains. So you're looking at anything with wheat flour, rice, barley, malt, you name it, even quinoa has to go. All the grains will be going, all your beans, your pulses, your legumes, they need to go as well. The root vegetables, they'll need to go. So the first thing to do when you get started is to understand what are the types of food that you're eating now that you need to stop eating, and that will be a great start for you. Okie dokie. So the next thing is to understand what we do eat. You'll need to replenish your cupboards. Hi Tracy, nice to see you. Yeah, so you'll need to replenish your cupboards and your fridge and your freezer, and you need food to eat. So the next thing you need to do is hop into the KISS group, go into the file section of the group and pick up some of those, the KISS food lists, because they'll give you a good idea of what you then need to actually start eating. What you'll notice is the foods that we eat are readily available, natural, unprocessed whole foods. So we're talking about meat products, poultry, fish. We're also talking about full-fat, unprocessed dairy products. We're talking about above-ground green vegetables. Hi everybody, it's nice to see you, thank you. Yeah, so we're talking about green vegetables, and we're also talking about fat as well. And some of the unprocessed and natural fats that we're talking about good olive oil, we're talking about grass-fed butter, we're talking about some coconut oil, some lard, just natural things like that, okay? So that's what you'll see there. You also see nuts and seeds. Remember, peanuts, and cashews are not nuts, so you won't see them on the nut list. We don't eat those on KISS, but you'll see there's plenty of food there, and hopefully it'll give you an idea and a sort of more of a clarity of the sorts of things that we're looking for to put in our diet. So that would be the next thing. You can use the demo day. There's a download in the group files, which actually gives a demonstration of what a day of eating looks like. It's very simple, and hopefully it'll give you an idea of the sorts of foods and how you would put them together in a day to have those 3 meals, and even some snacks when we start. That's not a problem. Okie dokie. So you'll also find a diagram called the KISS plate. What that does is gives you a visual representation of what a ketogenic meal could look like. And if you've been through any of the group posts, you'll see that there's a pattern to it. We eat fatty proteins, we add fat to our meal, and there's always a good serving of those vegetables there as well for our micronutrients. So that KISS plate will give you an idea of what needs to be on a balanced ketogenic style meal. So definitely things to do there. I'm going to move my paper because it's making me have to stretch across the table. Okay, so my other top tip then is obviously there comes a point where you have all the information that you need to start, and the next step is you deciding that it's time to do it. Now, I can't do that for you, and there does come a time where you've got to say, I tell you what, I'm just going to jump in and start. Hi, Deborah. So both my husband and I will be starting this new lifestyle, weight loss for me and hope to reduce psoriasis for my husband. We have a 3-year-old. How is it going to work for her? Luckily, Deborah, the food that we eat on a ketogenic lifestyle is absolutely excellent for growing bodies. We eat really nutrient-dense foods. We eat meat, dairy, green vegetables, nuts and seeds. So there's nothing that we eat that small children can't eat. And in fact, the ketogenic diet was designed for children originally. So you may want to continue to give some carbohydrates for your child. I'm not the expert in ketosis for children. However, what I do know is the food that I eat is absolutely the best food that you could possibly give a child. It's natural, it's high in nutrition, it's great for growth, it's fantastic for brain development, and if you're going to do anything for your entire family, increasing the amount of natural whole foods you eat is one of the best things that you can do. So just to reassure you that we don't eat anything that a 3-year-old can't eat. It's all good food. What we're doing is we're removing the processed rubbish. So she'll be absolutely fine, and hopefully will really enjoy the nutrients and the boosted metabolism. You might actually see some improvements in behaviour too. Who knows? Who knows? I'm sure she's an angel. Okay, so. Yeah, no separate meals, Deborah, don't worry about that. 18-month-old wants to eat everything I eat, so I was wondering, yeah, absolutely. There's nothing that we eat that is bad for children. This is all very good food. This is the food that humans were evolved to eat. We're hunter-gatherers, and we're actually designed to eat a lot of animal protein, a lot of animal fat, green vegetables, really nutrient-dense food. This is the actual stuff that humans are designed to eat, so don't worry. We actually aren't designed to eat anything in a packet. We couldn't hunt packets, and we certainly couldn't gather them because they didn't exist. So yeah, no worries there whatsoever about the health of this food. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks. So I'm going to move forward because I've got loads of information that I actually wrote today to give you all. So yeah, so I got to cutting out the excuses, because there does come a point where we do start making excuses as to why we're not starting, and we do actually have to stop that at some point. We have to write a shopping list. We have to actually go and buy the food, and then we have to eat it. So that's that first action, I guess. And there's really no need to stop yourself or to hesitate. You can just dive straight in, because the KISS community is there for you 24 hours a day to answer any questions or inquiries or anything else. So just dive in and see where you go from there, because someone will be able to support you even if you feel that you need some help. Okie dokie. So the next common obstacle that people come up against is carb cravings. Now, I remember them well. I had them for about 4 weeks personally, so I do understand what it is like to have carb cravings. However, it's been a while for me, a long time in fact, and once your body starts to really enjoy burning fat, then you'll start to crave fat instead, which is very, very bizarre. Not that I've quite gone to eating sticks of butter just yet. However, I certainly do start fancying something really, really fatty if I'm feeling low energy or anything like that. So what do we do about carb cravings then? Because unfortunately, carbohydrates, and especially things like sugar, fructose in particular, are quite addictive. So I think it's realistic to understand that there may be some carb cravings and have some strategies in place for when they inevitably sort of kick in. Now, some people will experience them straight away, and for others, they can come as a real curveball quite a long way down the line. In fact, they can come weeks down the line. So it's really, really important to have some strategies. So my strategies for this is, firstly, the way to remove carb cravings completely are to remove carbs completely from the diet. So if you're still having little tastes of carbohydrates, if you're still nibbling your children's food, if you're still having that one lick of ice cream or that one square of chocolate and that sort of thing, that will absolutely maintain your carb cravings. So the first strategy you need to understand is the only way to permanently get rid of a carb craving is to remove carbohydrates from the diet. So that's my top tip number one for that. The second thing is there are chemicals used by the food industry which actually are designed to increase appetite, to make you overeat, and you want to remove those from your diet because they will make you crave carbohydrates and crave more food. So you need to remove them. There's quite a few of them, MSG being one, but lots of natural flavorings that are used, but we know they have stimulating effects on appetite, yeast extract, even table salt increases appetite, and of course there's sweeteners. So when you remove the processed foods with those appetite stimulants in, you will help your carb cravings, and instead your body will be able to naturally regulate how much food you eat. So that will be another thing, is to start to think about whether you need processed foods in your diet, because believe me, there is no good reason for them being there. And hopefully you'll see that as you go through your time with us. So we talked about ditching carbohydrates, but you can also consider whether substituting carbohydrates with fake carbohydrates actually help or hinder your cravings. I know for me personally, we've discussed this in the group today. It's always a hot topic. However, what I know from trialing this plan with a group of 60 people is that those people who were using substitutes, sweeteners, or having lots of sweet foods, so the Greek yogurts and the berries and the dark chocolate and things like this, found it really difficult to regulate how much of that sort of food they were eating. And in fact, they started to eat more and more of the food until actually one of their meals a day became a sweet treat, and then the snacks came in and these sorts of things. So what I found from the trial was when we removed the sweet food and the sweeteners from that person's diet, they were far more able to self-regulate how much they were eating. So yeah, definitely consider whether keeping sweet food and sweeteners in the diet is helping or hindering your carb cravings. So yeah, we're all adults. It's completely up to you what you do. However, having supported that large group of people through the trial, we did find it was far easier for people when they did remove sweeteners from their diet. Okie dokie. So another thing that we can do then, if we are craving carbs, is to wonder whether we're actually hungry. Because sometimes when we're not used to a high-fat diet, sometimes we're not embracing the fat as much as perhaps we should, and we're not actually eating enough of it. So something I would say is, if you are craving carbs, it could be that your body's desperate for energy, and until you're really in that deep ketosis state, actually giving the body some fat to burn may actually suppress some of those cravings and give the body some energy. So if you are craving food, eat. Just make really good ketogenic choices, and make sure your meals are large enough, and snack until these hunger cravings are gone. So definitely eat more food. Just make really smart choices on what you eat. Does this include the keto bread? Should I stay away from it? It depends on the ingredients in the bread. Personally, I'm a real fan of the flaxseed bread, only because it's really, really low in carbs. It's really, really high in fiber, and it's really, really satisfying as well. And one roll of flaxseed bread is really filling. I'm not 100% sure on the other breads, because I don't tend to use a lot of almond flour and things like that. So it'll depend on how you feel as to your control. If you're having to eat bread every single day or with every single meal, then I would definitely say, is that stopping you from eating the amount of fat and protein and greens that maybe you should be getting from other food? So if bread is something that you can eat occasionally, for me, it's probably about 3 times a week, something like that. I normally have it with my soup that I take to work 3 times a week. But if you're finding that you're having to have these baked goods as a bit of a staple in the diet, then that is a big whack of the food that you're eating that should actually be far more diverse, and maybe should be more to do with your meat and your greens and your fat and things like that. So it's very dependent. However, you'll find that the nut flours and the flaxseed flours don't have the same appetite stimulus that the other baked goods with the sweeteners have in them. So it's definitely a different kettle of fish. However, bread is not something that you would have for every meal, because we want that diversity in our food. So yeah, slightly different there. But just to be aware that if bread is becoming a every meal thing, then that's probably taking away from some of the other foods that you should eat. Oh yeah, absolutely. If you're having bread once a week, it's not an issue. Absolutely, and of course flaxseed is great for us, and there's nothing wrong with a bit of almond flour either. It's just, like I said, if you're having issues with a particular food taking over your diet, then obviously we'd like to put more diversity in there. So no problem at all. So what did I get to? Yeah, eat high fat. Okay, the other thing that carb cravings can be an indication of is actually a micronutrient deficiency. It could actually be your body craving a particular nutrient. So I would always say to people, make sure that you are replacing your electrolytes, make sure that you are eating greens, you're having omega-3 rich foods, that you're keeping variety in the diet, that you're eating nutrient-dense foods. There's a list actually in the group of nutrient-dense foods, so it's definitely something to have a look at if you're looking to increase the amount of vitamins and minerals in the diet. But yeah, so it's definitely something to consider. If your body is seeking something, is it that there's some sort of deficiency in the diet? And potentially, if you're stuck in a bit of a rut, eating the same foods over and over again, potentially there could be a deficiency developing. And as we all know, when we eat ketogenically, we definitely deplete our minerals, and we need to replace them absolutely. Whether or not we're eating a good diet or not, it's really, really difficult to get as many trace minerals in as we need. Okay, so bone broth, Sharon, how healthy is it for you, and what does it do exactly? Bone broth is one of the most nutrient-dense foods, most health beneficial foods that we can possibly eat. Basically, all animals store a lot of minerals and a lot of their nutrients, a lot of their micronutrients in their bones, especially, and you've also got the marrow bone as well, which is full of anti-inflammatory cells, and also all the sort of immunity and everything else. So that's all in the bones. So when you make bone broth, you're literally getting the most nutrient dense part of that animal that you're eating. So bone broth is really, 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 really good. Not only do you get the minerals and your electrolytes, and you replace your sodium, potassium, magnesium and calcium from the bones, but also a really good thing about bone broth actually comes from the collagen, which is the protein that holds cells together and keeps cells strong. So collagen is something that you've probably heard of in face creams and beauty products. You've heard people of taking collagen, and basically what it does is it helps our cells to become stronger and more bouncy and more resilient. And actually start to turn back the clock a little bit for your skin. And for us who are losing weight, what we want to do is maintain that skin elasticity, and taking the collagen from the bone broth really helps with skin elasticity. So for me, bone broth is something that I do for my electrolyte balance, for my trace minerals, for my immune system, and for my beautiful face. And skin. So yeah, I mean, I can't go on enough about bone broth. It is literally one of nature's most amazing medicines. So yeah, definitely, I could go on and on about it. It's very, very good for us, and definitely something that can be incorporated daily. There's so much nutrition in it that it can really plug in some gaps from our food. So definitely something that you can make every week as a bit of a ritual or a bit of a tradition, with different animal bones, because diversity is great. But for me, chicken is lovely, and lamb. Beef, it's okay, but chicken and lamb definitely. Okie dokie. I'll move along then to the next common issue, and this is quite apt really. So the next common obstacle that people talk about is constipation, or slow digestion. And it's definitely something I hear a lot about when people talk about switching over their diet. I think that people first of all have to understand that when you eat a nutrient-dense diet, which the ketogenic diet is, first of all, there is less bulk going into the body. So obviously there's going to be less waste products coming out the other end. So I think it's not realistic to think that you're going to go exactly the same way as you did on a high carb diet when you were eating all your pastas and your breads and your rice and everything else. It's not going to be the same. But we can do some things to actually help our digestive system. And what we shouldn't be is really uncomfortable and unable to go to the toilet when we have that desire to go. So the first thing I would say is we need to make sure that not only are we drinking our water to thirst, but we're also making sure that we replace our electrolytes. So electrolytes are something that comes up again and again. However, they're really, really important in terms of your gut, and in terms of the muscles of the gut, which obviously push the food around the gut and out. So when these muscles aren't contracting properly, because there's a lack of electrolytes, you can get that sluggish digestion. So one of the best things to do is make sure that you're replacing your sodium, replacing your potassium, and most importantly, replacing magnesium. Now, you can get magnesium from food. It's quite easy to do the magnesium in terms of greens. However, if you're still having a sluggish digestive system, you may need to do supplementary magnesium as well. You can do that with supplements, but you can also do it with an Epsom salt bath, and you can even get magnesium oil that you can rub on your skin, and the skin absorbs magnesium really, really well. And when you absorb magnesium through the skin, you can't take on too much magnesium either. So in terms of safety, that's probably the best way of doing it. Hi, Dean. Okie dokie. So that's the first tip for constipation, would be to look at your electrolytes and definitely look at magnesium. The second one then would be fibre. Now, first of all, if you're already constipated, more fibre on top will not help. You need to actually sort the constipation first. So you'll do that through increasing the amount of magnesium, getting your hydration sorted, and maybe even a senna tea or a sort of natural herbal remedy. So you can do that. But once you have sorted that initial constipation, you might want to look to add some more fibre in the diet, because obviously that can help keep the guts healthy. So some high fibre foods that you'll see on the KISS plan are things like our flax seeds, our greens, and that's, you know, it's the vegetables really, let's be fair. So there's lots of vegetables on the plan, and hopefully you should be able to maintain gut health with the fibre and the magnesium. There's one last thing that you can do, and that's to start adding probiotics to your diet. It's actually the bacteria in our gut that actually keep our entire system moving really, really smoothly. So you can increase the probiotic foods that you eat. You can find cultured foods like natural yogurts, but also things like kefir. You can look at kefir cream, kimchi, sauerkraut, lots of different ways of bringing in fermented foods. But basically it's those live cultures that actually help our guts become healthy, and should help with constipation as well. But it's the probiotics and the fibre that you need to work together. Hi Kelly, don't worry, it's fine. If you've missed a bit, you can always watch it after, because I'm going to put it in the group for everyone to see anyway. Okie dokie, so on to the next thing. We're just talking about fermented foods, and fermented foods is really, really important for the next common obstacle, which would be bloating. So bloating is basically when you've eaten food, but for hours after you still feel you've got a distended stomach, that you've got trapped wind, and it can be quite uncomfortable, and you get crampy stomach. So bloating is basically, again, an issue with digestion in the gut. And again, it's things like fermented foods, fibre, and your electrolytes, and also removing processed food from the diet. And again, it's things like sweeteners that can actually upset the gut bacteria as well. So I would say removing the processed foods and replacing them with fermented foods and probiotics is one of the best things that you can do for your digestive system. And hopefully that should really, really help with bloating. Personally, I bloat after certain vegetables as well. Some of the vegetables I continue to eat because they're just so good in other ways. However, if you do find that there's a particular vegetable that makes you bloat, just swap out for something that doesn't. But yeah, so bloating is one of those things that we can definitely address. And the top tip is remove the processed food and the sweeteners, and get some fermented foods and some probiotics back in to actually support your natural gut bacteria. And that should help lots. Okie dokie. I know I'm being really quick. Do stop me if there's something that you want to ask a question about, but I'm just going to fly through this and try and get, and if you want to rewatch it, then it's going to be in the group anyway, so you can rewind and get any information you need. So the next thing then is water retention. Now, this is all to do with the difference between outside of our cells and inside our cells. So when we've got water retention, there's water outside the cell, not inside the cell. So the cell can actually be dehydrated, but there can be a lot of water in the actual tissue around the cell. And this is to do with an imbalance between sodium and potassium mostly. It can also be to do with lymphatic drainage. So the first thing I would want to do is make sure that not just sodium is being added to the diet, but also potassium is being added. And we probably need a lot more potassium than we think on this diet, because our entire environment is unfortunately quite low on minerals. So you could need to add potassium in terms of your avocados, your green vegetables, but also you might want to add some potassium salt as well to the diet. So, and I know certainly I do, because otherwise I do have a little bit of water retention if I'm not doing it. What that will do is allow the cells to draw in more water, so the cell becomes more hydrated and there's less water around the cell. And a good way to know if you need this is if you've got dry skin, or if you've got sock indentations when you take your socks off, because that normally means that you've got a little bit of water retention. And you'll notice that you have huge weight fluctuations if you start holding on to water as well, because obviously it takes months to gain body fat, but water, you can gain 5 pounds, 10 pounds of water in a day if you've got water retention, and it can freak you right out if you're a bit of a scale addict. So be aware that it could just be water retention. Other things to do if you've got water retention is to make sure that you stimulate lymphatic drainage, and a great way to do that is to actually get a dry brush, it's called, and just brush the skin towards the heart all over the body, and that should stimulate drainage of your lymphatic system. And you'll probably need a big wee about half an hour later because you'll have removed loads and loads of fluid. So that's another thing to do. And a good old massage is great as well to get that drainage going. Exercise, yeah, absolutely. Do you mean exercise for water retention, Deborah? I'm assuming that's what you mean. But yeah, exercise is good for moving fluid around the body. Yeah, so exercise is always good. But what you'll notice with exercise is when you actually challenge your muscles and produce well, it's not challenging, challenging the muscles is actually damaging the muscles when you work the muscles really, really hard, is the muscles themselves will actually hold on to water during the inflammatory response, and you'll see that you can gain a lot of water with exercise as well. In general, yeah, in terms of in general, what I will say is the beginning of a ketogenic diet is not the best time to start a new sport or to start a new routine, because to be honest, giving up sugar and the withdrawal symptoms and the actual transition into ketosis is enough to deal with. I would say personally, if you're already exercising, then continue to do what you're doing. However, if you're thinking of starting an exercise, I would wait until your ketosis is well established and then do it. During the first few weeks, I would say gentle exercise like walking, swimming is going to be far better, because what you'll find is if you start to do very intense exercise when you've given up sugar and you haven't got a lot of ketones in the body, first of all, you'll feel lightheaded, you'll have no energy, but I think the workouts will be so difficult, it may be a little bit demotivating. So I would say that the first few weeks of a ketogenic diet, a time to focus on food, and the time for exercise will definitely come shortly after. But I'm sure people who've tried to exercise in the first few weeks will tell you what it's like. It's tough, but it does get much, much easier. Okie dokie. Okay, so another thing that's come up in the group a couple of times in the last few days is people falling off the wagon. And I know that Sherry asked me to talk about that in my video tonight. And big thumbs up to Sherry, because she's becoming a gran yet again tonight, I'm sure. Fingers crossed. But yeah, so Sherry talked a little bit about falling off the wagon, and I know for some people it's a bit of an issue. What I will say is everybody does it. What matters is what you decide to do immediately afterwards. That's the key, and what decision you make at that point will determine whether the slip turns into something bigger, or just remains a life lesson and you move forward. So I would say that slips happen is what we decide to do afterwards. Whether we take that slip and the trigger as a huge learning opportunity to understand ourselves, understand our support network, understand our triggers, or whether we just throw in the towel and say, I can't do it. That's it. I ruined it. I can't do it. So it's that decision that you make immediately afterwards that is going to determine whether you pick yourself up and carry on or not. But just for you to be aware that everybody makes mistakes, everybody has slips, everybody goes out for food and halfway through a meal realizes what they're eating has probably got sugar in it, and the next day they have intense cravings and they're like, oh no, it must have been sugar that I ate last night. It's happened to me several times. People who've been in the group will tell you it still happens to me. However, my decision is that that this is the way I now eat. So I just go straight back to how I was eating. And within a day or two, it's like it never happened. So I think that's the crux of it, really. What you decide to do after you have that slip will determine what happens next, because we're all in control of our own destiny. So yeah, okie dokie. I'll move on from there because we're all grown-ups. But I just want you to know that it doesn't ruin all your previous work. The only thing that ruins your previous work is when you decide to allow a slip to become something bigger than a slip. Okie dokie. So the next biggest obstacle then is lack of weight loss on a ketogenic diet. Now, firstly, it's not inevitable that you will lose weight on a ketogenic diet. There's several factors that play a part. And there's different versions of the ketogenic diet, and there's different ways of doing it. From being in different groups, I know that a lot of people will be fixated on how much protein, carbohydrate and fat they're eating, and there won't be a lot of fixation on actually what foods and what quality of food is the person eating. And what I'll say is, if you are struggling with no weight loss, there's a couple of things that you can think about to help you assess what the issue is. The first one would be carbohydrates. Now, they're very, very sneaky, and they're in absolutely everything. If you've bought product from a shop, then I would say there's about a 75% chance it's got sugar in it. So there's a lot of hidden carbohydrates in our food, things that we maybe wouldn't initially think there was carbohydrates in. So I would definitely check, because even really savory foods can be high in carbohydrates. So I would definitely look at that. Look for any ingredients like wheat, corn, rice, bran, anything that could be a grain, anything that could be a flour or a starch. There's lots and lots of things that potentially could be still in the diet which is stopping you from losing weight. The other thing would be to have a think about how often you're eating. Obviously, every time we eat, we spike insulin, which stops us from burning body fat, and that's whether the food is ketogenic or not. We're still going to spike insulin after a meal, not so much, but we'll still spike insulin. So we need to be very aware of how many times a day calories are going into the body to spike insulin. So I would definitely say, if you're still snacking, or if you're still doing that sort of eating little and often, or grazing, or like I said, if there's other people's food and you're just taking little bites, or tasting food all the way through the day, just be aware that could actually be stopping your weight loss. And actually, the less often we eat, the more time our body spends burning body fat. So that's definitely something to think about. The next thing is, we talked a little bit about how long our bodies burn body fat. So thinking about incorporating fasting into your day or your week or your month could potentially help with weight loss as well, in exactly the same way as I've talked about. We stop burning body fat every time we eat. So if we eat infrequently but in large amounts, then we can spend more time actually burning our own body fat, which is the name of the game if you're looking for weight loss. Okie dokie. So the next thing, you can obviously remove the processed food. You have appetite stimulants and chemicals in processed food, which could stop you losing weight, and especially inflammatory things like corn oil, soy, and things like that. So I would definitely look to see what ingredients your processed food has, and think about removing them. There's also a stall breaker plan. Is everyone still there? Yeah, you can comment, guys, so do drop your comments and ask your questions. So there's a stall breaker plan in the group files. It's a week long. What it does is remove all the processed food. It removes inflammatory foods and really takes you back to absolute basic ketogenic eating. It's 2 meals a day. And it incorporates a bit of fasting, some hours actually fasted. So I would definitely say that if you fancy kickstart, you know, if you've been stalled or you're a little bit confused about what a ketogenic lifestyle is, that stall breaker plan is pretty much spot on of where we should be to see that weight loss. So definitely check that out to see if it's different to how you're eating at the moment. And the last thing is actually to do with stress and sleep. Now, when we don't get enough sleep, and when we are stressed, we release a lot of adrenal hormones, things like cortisol, which actually keep our blood sugar and our insulin, therefore, high. So what I would say is if you're doing everything you can in terms of food and still not seeing a weight loss, it could actually be to do with the amount of stress hormones that you're releasing and the amount of stress your body is under in terms of not having enough rest days if you do exercise, not getting enough sleep. And I would consider whether switching to an exercise program that is higher in intensity but has longer recovery periods may help you to lose weight a little bit more effectively. So definitely think about sleep and whether you're looking after yourself and trying to reduce stress hormones as well, because those stress hormones will make your body hold on to weight. So definitely have a look into that. What's the best time for breakfast? Before lunch, I think. Physiologically, the best time of day to eat is as early as possible. So if you want to take advantage of the time of day where we will naturally spike insulin anyway, then you will eat just after you wake. So within about an hour of waking up would be the best time to eat breakfast. However, what's also really important is that we reduce the number of hours in the day that we're actually eating. So the reason that some of us delay breakfast is we actually would like to eat with our family later on in the day. And if we only, we had our food window very, very early in the day, then we'd be done pretty much by lunchtime and there's no food after that. So, so physiologically, the best time of the day to eat is early. And I will say that if you're doing sort of the 2 meals a day or that shorter window, then make that first meal of the day your largest meal of the day, because it'll give the body chance and opportunity to burn that energy. And when you go to bed on a slightly smaller meal in the evening, then you'll spend more time in the night actually burning body fat. So yeah, basically the best time to eat is as early as possible. And for me, that means finishing my eating as early as possible. So I try to have my last meal before 5 o'clock if I possibly can. It's not always possible, but I try to get that last meal in as early as I can to have hours and hours and hours of digesting that food before I go to sleep, because sleep time is time for burning body fat, and it's the you know, the long period of my fast. So when I'm fast asleep and I don't know anything about it. Okie dokie. So yeah. Okay, last thing from me then, before I hand over completely to you and your questions, would be the other obstacle that I hear people talking about is how to eat when they're not at home. I think it's much more difficult when you're out and about to actually find ketogenic food. Now, firstly, you don't have to eat just because you're out. It's a common misconception that because you've met with a friend or you've gone out with, you've gone to town or something else, that you have to have food. You don't actually have to do that. You know, we're human beings who are actually physically designed to go days, if not weeks, without food. So you don't actually have to eat at every mealtime or at every eating opportunity. So that's the first thing to understand. You don't have to eat just because you're going somewhere. The second thing to know is that you can actually take food with you. And a lot of the success that I've had, I can say has come from preparing food in advance. You know, in fact, I'm 100% certain that had I not gone into sort of meal prepping, that I probably would not be where I am now. So I would definitely say that one of the great strategies for eating on the go is just to have things in the house that you can either make into a meal to take with you, or if you need to take something that you can't heat or anything, just some few nuts, some seeds, a bit of cheese, something like that to take with you, because ultimately we don't have to eat every couple of hours. We will survive if we just take a bottle of water with us or have a black coffee out with our friends and things like that. So, and it's actually a huge realization for me is how many excuses I had to eat and snack and you know, to sabotage my health. So now I'm quite comfortable to have a coffee without a cake, or have a bottle of water and not the popcorn at the cinema. And it's definitely, I think, a bit of a learning curve. But there's so many times that we are culturally or socially pressured to eat, when in reality, you know, we've eaten before we've gone out. There's another meal left of the day, and actually we'll survive. We'll get through it on a bottle of water, and we won't starve. I promise. I absolutely promise we won't starve. Yeah, absolutely. What about the theory of having to eat every few hours to keep your metabolism working? Yeah, absolutely. So, Monica, that's completely to do with carbohydrates. That's actually nothing to do with a ketogenic diet at all. It's to do with blood sugar. And what they're talking about is maintaining high blood sugar at all times, which is one way of stimulating metabolism. Ketosis wants our blood sugar really, really, really low. So we want the opposite effect. We're actually looking to keep our blood sugar low and our insulin low, so that our body is forced to burn body fat. It will only do that when there's no dietary fat to burn. So it's basically the exact opposite. The theory about little and often is to do with people who burn carbohydrates, and we don't. We actually eat like our ancestors did, like we evolved. Food was not something that you could just put your hands on. You know, it would take weeks of tracking that herd of buffalo before we finally caught one. It would be a long time before our meals, and then when we had that kill, it was so special and spectacular that we would dance around the fire for all night long and eat and feast, and it would be a huge celebration because we actually had food after days and days and days and days. Little and often is for carbohydrate eaters, it's for grazers, it's for herbivores, and you know, human beings, that's not how we evolved. So yes, I understand exactly why you would do it if you are on a high carbohydrate diet, because you're going to continually try to keep that level of blood sugar. However, we don't want to do that. We actually want to do the reverse. We want to keep our blood sugar really, really low. We want to keep our levels of insulin, which are triggered by blood sugar, very, very low. We don't want to store fat, we want to burn it. So it's really, really important that we do it that way. The way we stoke our metabolism is through feasting. We reassure the body that it can burn fuel by making sure that when we do eat, we eat plentifully, and we eat plenty of fat to actually give the body that boost, to make us nice and warm, and give us that opportunity to fast again. So that's the way we do it. Could not physically eat a large meal first thing in the morning. Yeah, I know. Yeah, Tracy, I completely get it. I'm not an early eater either. I tend to have my first meal at about 11, 12 o'clock. So, but yeah, absolutely. We need to get our last meal as early as possible, because if we're going to bed with food still in our stomachs, then we're going to be burning that fat instead of our body fat. So definitely try to get that last meal as early as you can. Lynn, what to say? I've learned that eating until I'm not hungry and eating until I'm full, yeah, are two different things. Yeah, absolutely, Lynn. And I think it's something that you learn over time. I think that during our lives, we are taught to eat in a particular way. First of all, we kind of force feed our kids a little bit, which we shouldn't do. But there's that whole clean your plate attitude. There's the whole I've bought it and I don't want to waste it sort of attitude. There's lots and lots of different reasons that we don't listen to our bodies, and I think that one of the things that I've learned, and hopefully that we'll learn as a group together, is to allow our body to be more in control than society and assumption and all these things that we've come to learn. We need to unlearn some of that stuff maybe, and start listening to our bodies. And this evening, my second meal of the day, I say this evening, it was afternoon really, I had soup and I had a roll, and I couldn't finish my soup. And how ridiculous is that? It's just soup. But then I realised how much butter was in it. And obviously my body is very, very adapted to fat, understands how much fuel was in that soup, and said stop. And maybe a while ago that wouldn't have happened and I would have finished the soup because there was that amount in the bowl. So yeah, who knows? But now I'm more able to listen to that little voice that's actually saying, wow, that was a lot of food. But yeah, definitely, like you said, there's two very different things. But when we're feasting and fasting and we've removed the appetite stimulants, then we can be more trusting of the body. Definitely. Okay. Okay, yeah. One of the top tips I thought of was, you know, when you've got one of those really awkward food situations where you're in a place and there's just nothing that you could possibly eat, and know that it was good for you. I'm thinking about places like, I don't know, Costa Coffee or Starbucks or whatever your local coffee shop is. The only thing they've got there is cake, paninis, and healthy salad full of grains or rice or pasta, and you just know there's nothing. For me now, that signals that I'm not eating, so I don't even bother in a lot of places to even look, because I just know I'm on water or coffee. So that's one of my top tips. So if you find yourself in KFC or McDonald's, you don't have to eat just because you're there. There are other eating opportunities in your day. You don't have to eat at that point. So we can, when we're out and about, think about how to eat the least bad food, but there is another strategy, and that is just don't eat. None of us are starving to death. The reason that we're doing this is that we want to lose weight, or for health reasons, and either way, eating at that moment in time is not going to help your goal. So maybe that's an appropriate time to not eat. And just because everyone else is eating doesn't mean you have to. We're all individuals. We all have different needs. They may need to eat and you may not need to eat, and that's okay. It's absolutely okay. And if it offends someone that you're not eating, then maybe you need to have a discussion with that person as to why you're not eating would be so offensive, because ultimately it does not affect them in any way. So yeah, maybe I'm just blunt, but I've had to have a few conversations over the last few months. Okay, so that's my some of my common obstacles and some practical solutions. I'm just wondering if there's anyone else with any sort of obstacles that they're coming up against, or any questions they've got, or if there's any differences between what I say and what they've heard elsewhere, because I know that my spin on things is probably different to other people's, and that's okay. Everyone's entitled to their different opinion. But is anyone sort of struggling with anything at the moment that would help the group? Maybe is anyone out there brand new and thinking, you know, I don't know what to do about this, or this is the first, you know, I've got this awkward situation coming up, or anything like that? Anything you can think of at all? Give it a couple of seconds. slow cooker. I actually sold my slow cooker and I'm really, really gutted, but I just ran out of space in my kitchen. You probably heard the other day that I'm already balancing things on my toaster. So I would say that most meats are really, really good in a slow cooker. So I would definitely do that. I'd have my bone broth in there, absolutely, every week. And I would do that for a good 24 hours in the slow cooker, and it would be absolutely amazing. So I would definitely do that. But yeah, I think for me, if I had a slow cooker, it would be lots of sort of pulled pork sort of things, and I would do a beef brisket in there. I've actually done a beef brisket in a slow cooker, and it was really, really nice. But that's the sort of things that I would do. And yeah, anything with, I think, cream cheese does really well in the slow cooker as well. So yeah, that's personally what I would do. I would do nice big joints of meat that will then fall off the bone. A nice whole chicken is great in slow cooker as well. So there's loads of things you can do. But yeah, I think my bone broth would be in there most of the time. Yeah, absolutely. Meal prep, dairy and pork free, not in ketosis. Not sure what you mean, Jackie. Anyway, let me know what you mean by that, Jackie, and if I can answer that for you, that'd be great. Deb says meal prep. Yeah, absolutely. So I do my meal prep on a Sunday. What I have personally found most useful is lunch prep. In terms of breakfast, first of all, I don't normally eat until lunchtime anyway. So breakfast for me isn't a big deal. And of course, dinner time, I'm normally at home, or my husband, somebody's at home to cook. So I'm finding that okay. But for me, it was lunches, particularly for work and things like that. And what I would do is on a Sunday, I've got meal prep trays, and I just make all my lunches for the week in one day. I pop a couple in the fridge and a couple in the freezer, and then I know all week long that my lunch is sorted. I also make a big batch of soup every week, which is really, really handy if there's no dinner cooked, or it's getting late, or I haven't got a chance to make something else, and soup will always go down an absolute treat. So there's always a big batch of soup. My lunch is done. But yeah, meal prep is really, really, really part of my weekly routine now. Eating Italian yeah, with broccoli, is that correct? If your Italian sausage has no dodgy ingredients in it, so if it's got no wheat fillers and starches and things like that, no MSG, then yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong. I'm assuming that Italian sausage is like a spiced pork sausage, and I certainly eat pork sausages that we get in the UK, which are gluten-free. They have no fillers, and they're just in natural casing and things like that. So if you can find a good sausage that has no dodgy ingredients in it, then absolutely, that sounds great. Yeah, definitely, and broccoli is a fantastic vegetable as well. So it's got protein in it, and loads of micronutrients as well, and fibre. So I would definitely say that's fantastic. Jan says, my husband and I are used to missing meal times. Absolutely. You know, I normally eat once with my family, but ultimately, you know, we're all adults and we're all individuals, and I think that my family, we either eat together and we eat the same thing, but if they want something different, then they can have something different. I don't have to eat because they're eating. My daughter, for example, eats really, really early, and her father then will eat hours and hours later. So we're eating not quite the same, and it's all to do with our individual needs, isn't it? And I think as long as we respect each other and understand why we're doing these things, and we can have those open conversations, keep those lines of communication open, is really, really important. But yeah, we don't have to eat just because someone else is eating. It's okay to sit with them with a glass of water, have that same conversation, and just not eat. Oh, one meal a day is sufficient, but because that meal is at about 7:30. Yeah, Tracy. Like you said, it's quite a late time to have your meal. and that could be one of the issues. But also with when you drop down to 1 meal a day, it's whether you can maintain the sort of energy requirements that your body has. For me, it's very difficult. You know, my metabolism is quite high still. I've maintained it because my calories are still quite high. So, you know, for me, it's very difficult to get almost 2,000 calories into one meal. So I do need to split mine into two to actually still get the actual nutrition and the energy my body needs. If I drop down to 1 meal a day, I start to feel cold, I start to feel less energetic and less able to do things. So I would definitely say that if 1 meal a day isn't working for you, definitely have a look at either moving it so that you have more opportunity to eat it, or split it if you can. Yeah, but try the stall breaker. It is 2 meals a day, and it's probably more calories than you're on now, but it should help your metabolism boost up a little bit. What bottled water with electrolytes do you recommend? I don't know. I don't actually drink any bottled water with electrolytes in it, so it would be difficult for me to say. And it depends what you can get your hands on, but I replace my electrolytes by salting my food properly, and I take magnesium either in a supplement form, or I have Epsom salt baths as well. So I don't actually have electrolyte water at all. So I'm very poor and just drink water out the tap. Yeah, so I wouldn't be paying anyone. If I was to want to drink electrolytes, I would just use normal water, and I would add Himalayan pink salt, and I would add a little bit of the potassium salt into it with a squeeze of lemon juice or lime juice, because otherwise it just tastes like salt water, and I would just do it that way. Yeah, I'll leave you all going now because it's been an hour. But I will happily answer any more questions that get put on the thread. So if you think of anything else, then do. Everyone who's commented on the thread will get that 50% discount code once we finish the broadcast. And yeah, Tuesday, guys, very, very excited. I'm losing a lot of sleep. I'm yeah, very anxious about it, but looking forward to it. Anyway, I'll leave you go because I'm going to try and enjoy my Saturday night, and I will see you all soon. Bye. It's not stopping.